Alright, hey everybody. Right behind me is my next flip that I'm going to be doing. It is essentially a buffet or a credenza, whatever you want to call it, from an old office. It's in really bad shape, so more than likely I am going to have to paint it. Whenever the question comes up, why didn't you just stain it? Why didn't you just restore the wood? I want to give more insight as to why I choose to paint when I choose to paint. Items like this often are just too far gone for me to restore, at least at my skill level. So this is the item. I am going to take you all through and just show you some of the things that make me think I am going to have to paint this. So I'm going to switch the cameras around so we can look at it together.
So the veneer itself has had all of this water damage, so it has all these big cracks like you can see here. That's wide enough for more than a fingernail. These are all throughout pretty much this entire half of the front of it. This one is a bit banged up over here. This corner has a small chip. The hinge was missing a screw, so that should be an easy fix. It's full of leaves from being outside. Over here there's this gap, and when looking inside of there, this has actually, this outer leg has swollen so much that it's creating this gap. So that's gonna probably be a rough one to fix, and I'll likely have to sand through the veneer. More scratches, more swelling. Pretty banged up corner.
Alright, well, hopefully seeing all that damage shows you why I'm likely going to have to paint this piece. I really hope I can get it back into a presentable condition and save it from going into a landfill. That's my ultimate goal here.
Alright, let's get to work on this. To start things off, I needed to remove these ends so I could sand them down and alter them. Removing the first one revealed some screws I didn't know were there, which ended up causing some damage, which prompted me to have to remove the top before removing the second one. I then started sanding and made sure to focus on any of the swollen parts to get those down flat. Before moving on to the second one, I decided to cut the bottom portions off of these because I'm going to be changing the legs. I then used some Bondo to repair the damage that was caused from removing this end, and once that was dry, I sanded those spots down. Then I worked on all the outer portions of the sides and the top. There were some swollen spots here from water damage that I also had to focus and make sure to sand down. And all the sanding ended up killing my rigid sander. Next, I needed to fill in all these gaps, so this was my first application of mud on the top and sides before I sanded all that down. I then flipped the piece over and did all the same steps on the back. And moving any part of this thing was quite a chore because of the 1-inch thick particle board. It was very heavy. Normally, if there are large gaps, you will have to do more than one coat of the mud. Now moving on to the drawer and cabinet doors, I am actually going to restore the wood on these, and so I'm starting off with stripping them. And anyone that's seen my previous videos knows my process for this is to scrape with the scraper, then scrub with the stripper, then scrub with water, and then wipe everything away. And then once dry, I sanded everything down with a 220 grit. And one of the drawers was broken, which I ended up making worse here. So I had to snip out the old brad nails and then glue everything up and fit it all into place, and then use some wood to sandwich and clamp that all together. I did have a lot more clamps, I just didn't get that on film, unfortunately. Next, to bring this piece more up to date, I decided to get rid of all of these big rounded edges by taking my router to them and chamfering all of them. This had to be done on both of the sides of the top, as well as all three sides on the end pieces. Once that was done, I just used a fine grit sandpaper to smooth over all those edges where I had cut. Next, it was time to make some framework for the legs. I used a scrap 1x4 and cut that to length. I then sanded them down, routed the edges, and then painted them black to match the legs. I then measured where I wanted them to go, added glue to the platforms, and then used a brad nailer to attach them, making sure they were square. I then attached the legs with the 6 screws, and then I repeated it on the other side. I got the extremely heavy piece stood back up, and then I started working on getting these sides reattached. I had to use a mallet to reseat the tongue and groove joints. Then I reattached all the screws from before. There were 2 screws on top, 2 screws inside, and then 4 screws along the bottom. Each side also had 3 tongue and groove joints, 1 long one and 2 shorter ones that I would fill with glue before getting everything tightened down with the screws. Next, I used a roller to brush on an oil-based primer. I did this before adding the top in order to make the nooks and crannies easier to get to, and then used a 220 grit sandpaper to take away any pattern left by the roller. I then reattached the top to make the next steps easier. This was about 16 screws total, and I would use a clamp to keep it as tight to the frame as possible when I screwed it in. Next, it was time to use a grain filler to start filling all the grain and cracks all over the surfaces. This was a long and arduous process that was alternating between sanding and applying more of the grain filler as needed. In some cases, I would sand by hand in order to target specific areas. More filling. And some more sanding. Moving on to the drawers, the first thing I did was apply some pre-stain conditioner. This helps the wood accept the stain more evenly and prevents blotching and dark and light spots. Next, I wanted to experiment with taking down this orange tint, and I found a trick on Reddit to use a paint wash. So I'm trying that trick here, applying the paint wash and then quickly wiping it back off. This gave me a nice color, but unfortunately not for this project. So since this didn't fit what I was going for, I went ahead and sanded that off. Then, to be extra sure the paint was removed, I used some acetone to clean these off. On my first attempt at staining these, I'm using Special Walnut. This has been a tried and true color I've used in the past and gotten great results. And this is an oil-based stain. While those dry, I switched over to the frame and sprayed it down in primer to get a nicer finish. Which highlighted some more issues that I needed to fill in. Spraying any type of paint comes out in such a fine mist that it really helps highlight any imperfections or grain or holes in your surface, because the mist will not fill those in. Alright, something that I had to work on that I wasn't able to show on camera just because it was too tedious, a lot of steps, and it just would have taken up too much time, was filling the grain on the chamfered edges where I used the router. Doing this ended up exposing a lot of pores within the wood, so I had a hard time getting those filled just because of their placement and angle. So I had to test a bunch of different methods and finally found some things that worked, which included not only grain filler, but also some wet sanding with wood glue to mix in the sawdust to get those all filled in. Then finally, once I got everything all filled in, I used a foam brush to go over those chamfered edges with the primer. And then we're gonna sand that down and get it smooth again, and then we're gonna spray the top coat over the top of it. So just wanted to share that since I didn't get it on film, and let's get to the rest of it. With everything all primed up, it was time to do paintable caulk in all the seams. And this piece needed it everywhere 2 panels were meeting, basically. I then applied the primary color to the frame. I did this in about 3 coats and used a very fine stream when spraying the front beams. I got all the masking off, which is always a satisfying process. After that, I started getting all the hardware added back on here. We had hinges and magnet clasps for the doors. I then started re-adding all of the drawer slides, and while doing this I added a spray lubricant and used that to clean all the drawer slides and lubricate the wheels as well. Next, I didn't like the initial wood stain that I used, so I went ahead and re-stained these with a darker color. Then the original hinges did not have the adjustment needed to reduce the overhang that was created by the door. So I used these hinges that were left over from a kitchen remodel to try to reduce the overhang. And in order to get these doors to sit more flush, I rounded this corner with the router so that it wouldn't rub when opening and closing. While the doors were off, I went ahead and started painting all the edges. I went around 3 sides on the doors and the drawers using a black paint. The paint was a lighter shade of black, so to get it even darker, I went over it again with a very dark wood stain to tint it even darker. Once all those dried, I started getting the doors hung, realizing that I missed the top edge on this particular door. It wasn't until after installing and adjusting the second door I realized that these hinges were for framed cabinets. And this is my face at the moment of realization. So it was back to the original hinges, and I had to figure out some way to get these to move back about 3 millimeters while there was pre-existing holes. The trick here was just to angle the screws. That way they grabbed the wood next to those holes and gave me the space I needed. And all that messing with the hinges ended up scraping some of the paint, so I just had to tape up the hardware and spray to repair those spots. For stain, the third time is the charm. The last time I stained it, it didn't give me a very uniform color. My doors were looking much different than the drawers. So this time I went with a gel stain and I chose the color Kona. I did 2 applications of this, allowing the first layer to dry before doing the second, and always wiping away the excess after about 15 minutes. Finally, I put it back together and I sprayed it in a water-based polyurethane for protection. And here we have the before. This was peeling and bloated from water damage, cracking, and just had damage everywhere. It looked outdated and was destined for a dumpster. And here we have the after and the completed project. We've given it a much more modern look. I chamfered all the edges all around it. We have that Kona color on the front and new metal legs on the bottom with a taupe or mushroom color for the frame. I really like how this came out. I know it was a lot of work, but I think it was worth it in the end. You all will have to let me know what you think in the comments. Alright, hey everybody, so we're finally finished. I appreciate everybody waiting. I know this took a long time and it was a lot of trial and tribulations to get this thing back into a presentable order, but here she is. This is one of those projects that makes me consider just giving up on the thing because I'm putting too much time into it, and too much time means I'm cutting into other projects I could be doing or literally anything else other than getting frustrated at a piece. But lo and behold, we got her done, and I hope that we can find it a good home. Thank you all so much for watching though, and being patient with me while I completed this one. Be sure to drop me a like or a comment. I do like to respond to all the comments on my page, and subscribe if you're new here. You can also check out some of my other projects that I've worked on, which I'll have linked on the video. All right, well, take care everyone. Until next time.